Okay, so we've talked a little bit about where the Renaissance took place, what helped it cause. Today we're going to focus in on the art of the Renaissance. And it all comes out of this new spirit of adventure and curiosity that we've started talking about. The greater importance of trade. You begin to have navigators sailing across the oceans. You have scientists viewing the universe in new ways and creating a whole lot of new inventions. And writers and artists experiment with a whole lot of new techniques, all along the lines of the humanist style of art. So, focusing just on art, the heart of the Italian Renaissance is humanist. Okay, the humanists focus on worldly issues, not on religion. They believed education should stimulate creativity, and they emphasized what are known as the humanities, such as grammar, rhetoric, which is public speaking, poetry, and history. Humanists studied the works of Greece and Rome to learn about their own culture. So they looked at what the Greeks and the Romans had done to see how they had gotten to this point. Okay, a little bit on that Greek and Roman art. It focused on actual people and on realistic images. Showed how humans really looked with detailed faces, hair, hands, feet, muscles, all the other stuff. Used perspective to show certain objects, either closer or farther away, trying to get dimensions on that flat sheet of art oftentimes. This is very different from medieval art, which is usually two-dimensional, very religious, and the artist doesn't matter. You don't have these celebrity artists that we'll talk about in a little bit later in the video. Okay, the Italian city-states, as we've already talked about, play a huge role in this. Each city is dominated by a wealthy and powerful merchant family. These families brought trade and wealth, and they provided leadership. They also were interested in art and emphasized personal achievement. They built themselves beautiful homes and grounds, and they wanted to decorate it. And once they were done decorating their own homes, then they decided it's time to decorate the city. They are what are known as the patrons of the arts, and they support the artists, writers, and scholars by commissioning works for them to do. Okay. The most famous of these families is the Medici family. They're merchants and bankers, and they control Florence, Italy after 1434. Lorenzo de Medici invited poets, philosophers, and artists to his city. Florence became the leader with numerous gifted artists, poets, architects, and scientists. And ordinary people begin to appreciate art outside of the church. So it's not just in churches, it's elsewhere, and it's so that the common people can see it. Okay, artists continue to portray religious themes, but they do so against more classical backgrounds. Donatello, one of the celebrity artists of the period, creates a life-size soldier on horseback, the first sculpture of its size since ancient times. And in this, what's a painting known as the School of Athens, Raphael paints a gathering of Greek and Roman scholars that includes the faces of his contemporaries, Michelangelo, Leonardo, and himself. Okay, Renaissance artists begin using new techniques, and we're going to talk about these techniques in class a little later in the week. But all of these lead to greater realism. They return from the stylized forms of the medieval period to much more realistic portrayals that were the backbone of classical Greek and Roman art, and they use these techniques to present both humans and landscapes. So they move beyond just painting the religious to painting everyday life. Okay, one new technique is perspective, and you have kind of an example of it here. And this is credited to a man named Filippo Brunelleschi, who we'll learn a little bit more about again later in the week. Distant objects appeared smaller, and perspective allows for more realistic art. You know, it's not everything is just right in your face. You get this idea of depth in the painting, and we'll see that as we look at some of the paintings. Okay, they also use new oil paints to reflect light and use shading techniques to make things look more real. Everything was about making it look more lifelike. Tried to portray things in three-dimensional fashion. They studied human anatomy and drew from observing models and resulting in more accuracy. Okay, Leonardo da Vinci is probably the greatest of these artists. He certainly is the most versatile. He's an artist, he's an inventor, he studies all sorts of other topics. He used perspective in painting his Last Supper painting. He left sketchbooks filled with ideas for inventions, including submarines and flying machines. Some of his other art. This is a sketch of his. Okay, anybody, if you know the name of it, great. What I'd like you to be able to tell me when you come into class is why it's considered Renaissance art. This is known as the Vitruvian Man, and it's considered Renaissance art because it has to deal with the whole proportion and perspective of how a human body is. No longer do you have these long arms with short bodies, or the other way around, the head. Everything is in alignment to the rest of the body. The Mona Lisa, one of Leonardo's work, it's probably the most famous painting in history. There is some schools of thought that say that this is actually a self-portrait of Leonardo, and he made himself into a woman just to kind of show his versatility, but you can see the backdrop against her where things look farther away behind her. Okay. Michelangelo Buonarroti, sculptor, engineer, painter, architect, and poet. Best known for his sculptures such as David, which I'll show you in a minute, and for painting the ceiling of the Sistine Chapel in St. Peter's Cathedral, where the College of Cardinals meet to elect new popes. He also designs the dome of St. Peter's Cathedral. And those of you who have Mrs. Passetti, she's going to talk a little bit about this in art. This is from the ceiling of the Sistine Chapel. This is basically the creation of Adam. The guy on the right with the beard and everything, that is supposed to be God. And he has all these angels around him, and he's touching his finger to Adam, giving Adam consciousness, making him into a human. That was how it was depicted. His statue, David, probably thought to be one of the most uniform or an anatomically perfect sculptures ever done. That he looks extremely lifelike. And then you have the Pietà, which is, there's lots of these Pietàs there. It's a sculpture done of the Virgin Mary holding the body of Jesus, and some of the techniques he employed that makes the Virgin Mary look bigger than Jesus, and but they're actually the same size, and all this other stuff. He used a lot of the techniques of the Renaissance to create this. Okay, so the idea is created in Italy, eventually spread north. Period becomes a golden age, which leads to 500 years of world dominance by Europeans and their descendants, Americans. Okay, so now you need to complete the Google form quiz and submit. Over the next couple of days in class, we're going to dive a lot more deeply into the Renaissance art.